There's a famous saying by the grandfather of a Kurdish filmmaker called Hinir Salim, and he quotes his grandfather as saying, "Our past is sad, our present is catastrophic. Fortunately, we don't have a future." Now, no one in Kurdistan would talk that way today. They've seen an utterly remarkable transformation. At the end of the 1980s, they were subjected, undoubtedly, in my judgment, to genocide, the deliberate intent of the state to exterminate part of the population and to encourage the rest of the population to flee. That nadir has been succeeded by a form of restricted self-government in borders that were determined by Saddam. He withdrew from trying to govern the entirety of Kurdistan. He arbitrarily established what is the current boundary of the Kurdistan regional government. They were deprived of access to economic resources from Baghdad. They didn't get their appropriate share of Iraq's oil revenues. They were subjected to double sanctions. They had sanctions by the United Nations on Iraq as a whole and sanctions by Baghdad against Kurdistan, which were eventually partially relieved during the Oil for Food program, in which Kurdistan received some of the monies that it might otherwise have been entitled to had it been treated properly as part of Iraq. Now, if you compare the situation of Kurdistan today with the situation of Kurdistan before the American liberation of Iraq from Saddam, it's a remarkable story. The Kurdistan region today is unified. It has a common parliament, a common government. The two major parties which fought a civil war in the mid-1990s together share power in the Erbil parliament. They organized a common electoral list for Kurdistan in the Iraq-wide federal elections on 2 successive occasions and did remarkably well. Ministers from the Kurdistan region play a very significant role in the Baghdad federal government. They have foreign affairs, they have one of the deputy prime ministerships, and they notably have the presidency. So they've succeeded in unifying themselves, they've succeeded in creating a power-sharing government at home, and being key players in maintaining a power-sharing regime in Baghdad itself. They've negotiated and were the key architects of Iraq's constitution of 2005, which is a fresh page in Iraq's constitutional history. It makes Iraq a pluralist federation, both on paper and I think in practice. It recognizes Iraq as a land of many nationalities, a country of multiple religions, not merely Islam. It provides all of the self-government that Iraq could possibly concede to Kurdistan without ceasing to be a state. So if you look at the constitution, the number of exclusive powers of the federal government are remarkably few. Kurdistan has the substance of full domestic independence. It has its own army, the Peshmerga, lawfully authorized and retrospectively authorized as the valid army of Kurdistan back to 1992. The current situation is that the southern border of the Kurdistan region is the line drawn by Saddam. And that needs to be emphasized because most pious Western commentators say, why do the Kurds want to expand their region? They forget that Saddam drew the boundaries. The existing boundary is not the result of any constitutional, consultative, or democratic process. The United States, when it removed Saddam's regime, when it negotiated the transitional administrative law, put a block on changes to the internal boundaries of Iraq before the permanent constitution was made. In the permanent constitution, the Kurdish parties won an agreement specified in Article 140 of the constitution that laid out a path for resolving the disputed territories, as they were called, and particularly the province of Kirkuk. If Article 40 was implemented to the letter or in spirit, this would involve having a referendum to resolve the status of Kirkuk governorate or province, based on an electorate which would include the Kurds and Turkmen who had been expelled by Saddam, but exclude the settlers brought in by Saddam after 1968, and the elections would take place in the boundaries of Kirkuk as they were before 1968. It's important to realize that the current boundaries of Kirkuk province are not those that they were before the Baathists took power. In effect, Saddam executed what I call a salamander. He hived off Kurdish majority areas from Kirkuk and added on Arab majority areas from other provinces. He also shrank the province as a whole. When people will tell you that the dispute in Kirkuk is all about oil, that's true from the Baathist point of view. That's what they were concerned about. They feared that if the Kurds got hold of oil in Kirkuk, they would either use it to become independent or their dependency on Baghdad for financial aid and assistance would be broken. Kurds will tell you, and I think accurately, that they want Kirkuk not just because of its oil, but because they regard it as part of their national territory. If you go back for centuries, it's quite clear that the governorate, if not the city, has always been Kurdish within recent historic times. The city is a mixed city. It has a Turkmen population, loosely related to the Turks of Central Asia, as well as the Turks of Turkey, and an Arab population and a Kurdish population. Kirkuk is the most controversial of the disputed territories. The way to resolve it is fairly straightforward, and it's mapped out in the Constitution. Have a fair referendum within the fair boundaries, and then make sure that the post-referendum arrangements compensate the losers. The losers can be compensated in two ways. Politically, if they stay, the Kurdistan government has made it plain that there will be power-sharing arrangements in Kirkuk city. And those would involve the protection of the languages of the Turkmen, the Arabs, and indeed of the Assyrian Christians, who are a small proportion of the relevant city. The second form of compensation is already available and has been taken by some, namely those settlers who came into Kirkuk under Saddam's inducements will be financially compensated for returning to the governorates from whence they came. In a sense, they'll have benefited twice because they came to Kirkuk with special bonuses from Saddam, and they'll leave with special bonuses. But it's probably the best way of dealing with this kind of tension. So Kirkuk governorate is the most important of the disputed territories. It lies at the heart of the border between the existing Kurdistan region, the southern part of it, and the northern part of Arab Iraq. It's in the middle. It's astride the second largest oil field in the world. If Kurds have control over it, it doesn't mean that the oil becomes theirs, because under the constitution it's an already exploited oil field. So the link between oil and territory has already been broken at the level of the constitution. If Kirkuk becomes part of Kurdistan, the oil goes to Iraq as a whole. If it does not become part of Kurdistan, the rest of Kurdistan still benefits from Kirkuk's oil on a per capita basis. So the negotiators of the constitution have separated the issues of oil from the issues of territory. But if you listen to the world's media, you wouldn't know that that had actually happened. People say the Kurds are going to take the oil, and then, if you're a Turk, they're going to build a Kurdish air force, and then they're going to carve out a greater Kurdistan using their new air force. This is preposterous. Kirkuk's importance in terms of oil is this. If Kirkuk is within Kurdistan, the revenues from the Kirkuk oil field must go to Iraq as a whole. But what it will mean is that no Baghdad government over the next couple of decades will be able to blackmail the Kurds by stopping them having their fair share.